Good evening. We do not want to belabor your time. It is 6:43. We are live streaming, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This room should be packed, but we're going to get what we get from the knowledge and then take it back to the community. And like I said, it's live streaming, so it'll be up on YouTube where you can continuously just share it. But thank you all for coming out today. Give yourselves a hand on a Monday. Yes. My name is Rhonda Taylor, and I am actually the president of the Atlanta East District Social Action Commission, which consists of 24 A.M.E. churches in and around the Atlanta metro area. And this particular forum is important to us because we have not had this election in 4 years. And so 2022, 2025, 3 years. And so we are at a point, I'm going to give you a little background on it before I bring up the moderator. There was a lawsuit that was filed by several organizations in 2022, right, that said that the way that we elected our PSC, Public Service Commissioners, was unconstitutional because it was at large. And that's important because we don't have anyone that looks like the minorities, okay, that prevented minorities from being elected. They lost, those organizations that filed the lawsuit lost that claim. And so the judge ruled that it's constitutional to run at large. So here we are having a special election to fill that seat for a limited time, because I think both, is it 2 and 3 come back next year? They come right back again next year on the ballot with the gubernatorial, the governor, to vote for them to go back in as well. So they're trying to catch it up and get it back on track because they're staggered. They don't all run at the same time. So the important thing I need to say is that there are 2 districts, District 2 and District 3. District 2, I gave you some handouts to kind of break that down for you. District 2 is more coastal, Savannah area. District 3 is the majority of the Atlanta metro area. Okay, so that you thinking that if I live in DeKalb, that means that's who I'm voting for. But you're going to be voting for both districts. So when you go to the polls, you have to vote for someone in District 2 and someone in District 3. And I thought it was very important that we gave you the candidates, the bios of the candidates, a little brief blurb about who they are, because, some of us don't like to do the research, so now you got it right there, and you can literally have that with you when you go to vote, when you take it to the polls. And it's this piece of paper here that has the pictures of the candidates. It's featuring both District 2 candidates and District 3 candidates. And gives, like I said, a little blurb about them. And remember, today is the last day to register to vote and vote in this particular election, which is on June the 17th. Early voting begins May 27th and runs through June 13th. We are avidly encouraging absentee ballot voting for this election, and I'll tell you why. It's a one ballot measure. So getting people to go back to the polls for one question or voting for 2 different districts, it's going to be challenging. Matter of fact, keeping up with it is going to be challenging. You're used to seeing a whole lot of signs everywhere and commercials, and you're used to seeing ads. That's not happening in this election. So we're asking that you do absentee balloting so you can just, in the privacy of your home, fill out your ballot, mail it in, and it's done. You have to vote in this election. You have to vote in this election, okay? And with that, I want to bring up our moderator, who is a very dear friend of mine, an amazing woman, hardworking sister, and she is the deputy political director of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, and she's also the president of the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council. Miss Sandra, are you ready? I'm introducing to some and presenting to others, Sandra Williams. I am so sorry. I forgot, we in the church. Let's give an opening prayer. This is Reverend Higgins that's going to open us up in prayer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see all of you here. I am the executive pastor of Antioch A.M.E. Church. Our pastor, in his absence, we had a member who lost their mother, so he traveled to North Carolina for that funeral. So I am here in his stead. But I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And you're right, the room should be packed, but we can also take this information back to our communities. Let us pray. Almighty and sovereign God, we thank you so much for this opportunity to come to this candidate forum to learn more about our Public Service Commission candidates. God, we're asking for the presence of your Holy Spirit in this place as we listen, as we learn, as we're educated, oh God. Help us so we can make the decision necessary so we can have a democratic public service commissioner. We thank you, God, for the opportunity to serve. We thank you, God, for those who are here on our panel. And we thank you, God, for our Atlanta East District Social Action Ministry. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And let me introduce you. See the people in the orange shirts? That's the Antioch Social Action. And we have our Connectional Social Action Commission president here, which is co-president, is how y'all say it, Dr. Dozier, so she's here with us as well. The Atlanta East District is 24 churches strong. And so we work with all 24 of those churches to make sure that the A.M.E. members are very well informed 24/7 year-round. And when it comes to policy, we're nonprofits, so we don't advocate any candidates, but we do push for policies, and we actually voice our opinion about those policies. So without further delay, Ms. Sandra, take it over.
Dr. Dozier, do you need the mic? Well, Dr. Dozier, thank you for taking the first half of my opening remarks. But a pleasure to be here with you. I am Sandra Lee Williams. I am the Deputy Political Director, as we heard my dear friend Rhonda say. But tonight, I am the moderator for this program. And so I have a little bit of instruction for you. I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is you're in for tonight, and it's going to be a fun ride. Before we start, I'm going to take a personal privilege. My sister flew down to be with me this week, and she came down from St. Louis this morning, luggage lost and all that, and she still made it here to the forum tonight. So thank you, Sharon Williams-Barber. Go ahead.
Okay. She wanted me to, let me just clarify. You all see 3 candidates in front of you. There are actually 5 candidates on this ballot for District 3. All were confirmed except for Mr. Fitz Johnson, who is the incumbent currently serving. And today we got a call from Mr. Peter Hubbard saying that he needed to come in virtually, and we didn't think that that was appropriate or fair. We didn't give that option to all the other candidates to do virtual, so he's not with us tonight. So we have 3 dedicated candidates that are here, and I want to make sure that you know we reached out and we made contact with all candidates. For District 2, Tim Eccles also declined, and he is the incumbent and the chairman. He's the chairman of the board, and he declined. And Lee Munns, his opponent, primary opponent, no response. Alicia Johnson had a conflict, but that's the coastal area. And I thought just send us some information to put on our tables and to distribute, because we didn't want to ask you to drive from Savannah on a Monday. Okay, but I wanted you to know that all candidates were reached out to. Again, Fitz Johnson said he had a conflict. Mr. Hubbard needed to come in virtually, and we could not accommodate that. Thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, let me just say to you that we are all happy to be here tonight. You're going to learn a lot from these candidates, and then you will have some decisions to make as you go to the poll. So first, let me start off by saying that the labor unions are very political. I won't stand here and tell you that we are nonpartisan, because we are not. We encourage informed and active participation in government, and so I'm very pleased to see all of you here. There's also a number of people that are online. This forum is going to be part of an ongoing voter education effort to help voters make informed decisions and to make sure that we show up at the poll. If nothing else, we know from this past presidential election that we have to beware. We have to show up every time. We have to take people with us. We have to educate one another. Okay, so here are some instructions about what you need to know tonight. So we welcome you to the candidate forum. I'm going to start by explaining some of the procedures for tonight. And so, candidates, listen up. There will be no opening statements tonight. You'll have an opportunity for a closing statement, and those closing statements will be 1.5 minutes. Pay attention to the lights in front of you. Follow that bouncing ball. You see the green light is on now? When you see that yellow light, it'll be 30 seconds. You see that red light, that means you're really talking, but we're going to have to ask you to pause and let the next candidate answer. There will be 30 seconds after each question for rebuttal statements, and those will be done in the following order, based upon seating. So we're going to start with the young lady, Ms. Keisha Waits, at the end. We're going to make her number 1, Mr. Blackman number 2, and Robert, if you don't mind, Mr. Jones, will you be number 3? Okay? That works? Okay. And we may switch it up and do some reverse order things as well. When there's a half-minute mark, as I mentioned, you're going to see the timekeeper. Timekeeper, wave. Wave at them, timekeeper. You sitting right in front of him, but I want to make sure. There you go. If it really gets to red, he will use that buzzer. And then if anybody continues to speak, we do have a stop card that'll be held up that everybody will see that you kept talking when we asked you to stop, and we'll say thank you, and then move on to the next speaker. You will have an opportunity to answer each of the questions. So I'll pose one question and then ask each of you to answer and respond. Any personal references about other candidates will be considered out of order. Please note that the cameras at the back of the room and this forum is being broadcast. So just keep that in mind, and it will be on the church's YouTube channel. Audience, there are instructions for you as well. So please make sure, check your phones now, make sure that you have them on what? Silent or vibrate. We request that you treat all candidates fairly. No yelling out, please, no cheering. Okay? You can smile. We'll get to the time where we have audience participation, but that will be after they answer the selected questions here. And what we'll have is someone handing out the small index cards to write down your questions. And so we'll use those cards at the end to collect questions from the audience. Questions may be addressed to all the candidates, but must apply to issues or qualifications for their particular office. Raise your hand if you'd like to add another index card to have a question. We'll review the questions for clarity and applicability to all candidates. We'll use as many questions as time allows. Let me just say this. We have allotted 90 minutes for this. We don't have to go 90 minutes if you're out of questions and you feel that the candidates have clearly responded to questions that you may have. But we've allotted not only the 90 minutes, but we're also asking that the candidates make themselves available in the church hall afterwards, just in case people have questions or want to address you on a one-on-one basis. Everybody clear on this side? This side? You good? Okay. Any questions? And there will be refreshments. So in case you were thinking about leaving, there will be refreshments, okay? Okay, and then lastly, let me tell you a little bit about the questions. So the questions were prepared and reviewed by the facilitators. Those facilitators are the DeKalb NAACP, the AED, Social Action Commission, as well as the Labor Council. And then questions submitted in writing at the event will be reviewed, as I just mentioned, and passed to the moderator, that is me. And then questions asked by the audience from the floor, we have a time limit for those. They can be ruled out of order. Please make sure that we're sticking to the subject and the topic of the PSC race for this district, okay? Any questions before we move on? All right, well, if there are no questions, let's get started. You have a minute for each question, candidates, and 30 seconds for each rebuttal. Any questions from the candidates before we start? Okay. This is so exciting, isn't it? Okay. So, Ms. Waits, you have the first question. Can you please explain how, and this is the process of the commission, how the commission determines rates of increased requests from the utilities that the Public Service Commissioner is responsible for?
Explain the process in terms of how they dictate what the
How
rates
do they determine the rate increases?
Okay. I don't know the answer to the question.
Okay.
May I give another thought?
Absolutely. You have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. So, in terms of how they determine the rate process, I can't answer that tonight. But what I can tell you is the fact that I know that we've had multiple rate increases over the last couple of years. I can speak to that. Okay. I can speak to the fact that we've given our $296 million in incentives to data centers throughout the nation and around the globe. I can speak to the fact that right now, our rates are 40% lower than those of the national index. As a PSC member, my job is to be a watchdog and an advocate for the consumer. That's what I can speak to, and that's what I'm here to talk about tonight in terms of how I would utilize my voice and the opportunity of the pen to rail back some of the increases that you've seen, and also, too, to educate the public, because many people don't know what the PSC does. And so I see that as a role as well in terms of being an advocate, as well as being someone that can educate the public in terms of what is happening regarding the utility rates in Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman, same question.
The most important part about the Public Service Commission is to understand the rate-making process, which is, quite frankly, a determination made when utility companies are creating infrastructure projects. And for those that don't understand, you have 5 members of the Public Service Commission, and each of those members are responsible to make fair and equitable decisions, which we have seen over the last 7 years. 6 of the last 7 years, as it was mentioned, rates have gone up. So take, for example, in a minute and 30 seconds, I want to give you an example. Several years ago, we had the expansion of nuclear Plant Vogtle. When Plant Vogtle was created, it took 7.5 years beyond the schedule, and it was over $15 billion above budget. What that meant was that Georgia Power, fixed by Georgia law, was able to get a return on their investment, and those cost overruns were pushed on to the ratepayer. So in short, rates are made by public service commissioners that get dockets and get information on how utilities are regulated, and we have to make responsible decisions based on how the energy in the state of Georgia is used, how to be shared by the utility companies, and then determine what those rates are fixed, including the energy mix that ultimately makes that decision.
Mr. Jones.
So the process of determining rates is really one of cost allocation and cost accounting. Essentially, if you take an income statement of Georgia Power, you go through and look at every line item and make a determination. Is it prudent and reasonable? If it's prudent and reasonable, it goes into the cost base. If it's not prudent and reasonable, it gets thrown off. So that's really the contention that goes on. Is it reasonable or is it unreasonable? Once it's determined as reasonable, then basically you tack on another 10 to 12% for profit, and that's how rates are set, in essence. Now, today we had some important news. There's not going to be another rate case. Georgia Power's decided to hold rates flat for another 3 years. We need to talk about that tonight. It's a political maneuver to basically shortchange Democrats trying to get into office.
Thank you. Now we can move on to our next question, which will start with Mr. Blackman, Mr. Jones, and then Ms. Waits for the response. The U.S. Supreme Court has determined that rates must permit the utility to earn a return comparable to that of enterprises involving similar risk, to preserve the financial integrity of the company and to allow the company to attract investors. How will you ensure that your decisions as a public service commissioner prioritize the needs of everyday consumers, especially low-income and rural communities, over the interests of powerful utility companies?
I think there should be transparency across the board, but the bottom line is for all of us that have working families, that have jobs, that have built a legacy for our families, we understand that if we don't perform at our jobs, we get fired. And the Public Service Commission has literally over and over again given Georgia Power and other utility companies time after time to fail and to also receive and recoup a profit. So the two things that I want to do as your next Public Service Commissioner is, number one, we need performance-based metrics. If there is a project that is in place, such as a data center, and that data center is not performing to the capacity in which we have charged ratepayers, we need to be able to revisit that investment, and we need to be able to change that narrative. The second thing we need to do is educate. One of the reasons that this room is not packed is because most people, as it was mentioned earlier, by Representative said earlier about how what am I trying to say? She mentioned earlier about, I just drew a blank. I'm so sorry, guys. People don't know about it. She mentioned the public utilities. So it was a legislation, I'm so sorry. Legislation was supposed to be passed to change it from the Public Service Commission to the Public Utility Commission. And so, sorry for the blank, but I'll say this in 2 seconds. It did not happen. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
I'm glad you mentioned the Supreme Court, because I got into this race because I couldn't believe the things that are happening in terms of commissioners that are taking money from the utilities, in terms of how the commissioners are having you pay for things that the utilities should be paying for themselves in terms of construction. So I went through and read all of Section 515, which is the state code over the Public Utilities Commission, Public Service Commission, and this stuff is legal. I couldn't believe that this is legal. So I'm in this race to really try to push a big rock up a hill, which is to get the laws changed, because otherwise it's going to continue there. So right now, it's okay for utilities to give money to commissioners. It's okay for them to take money from your pocket and basically fund their construction while they're giving excess dividends to their shareholders. So it's going to be a big task, but effectively the laws right now sanction the behavior that you're seeing, and they're unjust and abusive.
Thank you. Ms. Waits?
Yes, ma'am. Can you repeat the question, because it's become
Absolutely. It's been a minute
I've heard it a lot.
or two. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court has determined that rates must permit the utility to earn a return comparable to that of enterprises involving similar risk, to preserve the financial integrity of the company and to allow the company to attract investors. How will you ensure that your decisions as a public service commissioner prioritizes the needs of everyday consumers, especially low-income and rural communities, over the interests of the powerful utility companies?
Thank you. So a couple of things come to mind. The individuals that need us the most, who have the greatest needs, specifically marginalized and low-income communities, often pay the most. So a couple of things I'd like to see. The $296 million, Representative, that Governor Kemp approved in tax incentives for these individuals, I think we should put those back into a tiered system to help those who have the greatest needs, a tiered program. Many of you remember in Atlanta, we built the public safety training facility. It started out at $30 million, it went to $60 million, and then it went to $90 million, and it's still going. And so one of those examples that I see is that even though we want to attract businesses, we want Georgia Power to make a profit. We understand that, but we don't want Georgia Power to do it on the backs of citizens and everyday working families. And so for that reason, I believe we need a tiered system. Lastly, we've talked about the 6 rate increases over the last 2 years. One of the things, and my colleague down there just mentioned the fact that this race has already had an implication in terms of how we influence. Okay, we'll get into it later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. Our next question is, how can the Georgia Public Service Commission encourage investment in and the adoption of clean energy like solar, wind, and other renewables, zero to low carbon resources? And I would like to start with Mr. Jones.
That's a great question, because basically you're saying, how do we open up the market to competition when basically you've got a monopoly with Georgia Power that's doing everything in its way to basically prevent new innovation alternatives coming in place. So I'm very much around going to rooftop solar, putting in battery systems, and selling excess electricity at market prices back to the utility company. They're going to resist that like there's no tomorrow, okay? There's a lot of innovation going on in other states and in other countries that are clean energy. We should be basically piloting and scaling those up here in Georgia. You've got monopoly power, you've got monopoly abuse going on, and that's why I'm in this race to basically try to change the laws so we can open up to a more competitive environment to get the benefits of this new technology.
Thank you. Ms. Waits.
So solar is certainly the way to go right now. Georgia Power, however, has not encouraged solar participation. There is a buyback program that is in place currently. However, there are many obstacles to receiving those buybacks. So one, we need to educate the public, first of all, that there is a buyback program and that there are incentives to purchasing solar, which I'm pretty sure many of us in the room don't know anything about. And then lastly, we need to figure out ways to drive down the cost. And I'm going to take you back to the incentives that were given out statewide to data centers and others around the world to encourage individuals to come to the state of Georgia. We can put those funds back into the hands of ratepayers and working families in terms of driving down costs for solar. So that is how I see an opportunity that we could take advantage of that in Georgia. Thank you.
So I actually have to say, Mr. Jones actually brought up a really good point about competition, right? Many of you all understand a monopoly removes any form of competition. And what we have in the state of Georgia is an unfair ability to negotiate prices or to look at what is implemented in what's called an IRP, which stands for an Integrated Resources Plan, where Georgia Power is supposed to talk about their combined energy mix. This, for example, was the case in 2013 when I first ran for this position, because I understood that Georgia Power put out a plan at the time that had 20 years of fossil fuels, right? So we actually worked with Democrats and Republicans across the state to include 13.6% of solar into the mix. It wasn't popular then, but as a result, I was appointed by President Biden 2 years ago, and we launched the bipartisan infrastructure law, which allowed us to invest in companies like Q-Cells in Georgia. So when you think of this investment, think of rooftop solar, as it was mentioned by Mr. Jones, but also community solar, right-of-way solar. We have to think of innovation, and I was very proud to serve under the last presidential administration to bring over $3.6 billion into this region.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, we're going to start in the middle and then work around. We'll figure this out. Mr. Blackman, the Georgia Public Service Commission is one of the most impactful yet overlooked state agencies. What can commissioners do to increase awareness about the PSC's role, the duties, and decisions made by those commissioners?
So I'm gonna give you guys an answer. Please don't take this as sarcastic. They don't want you to know, right? That's why they get paid $120,000 a year. Their terms are 6 years. They take unlimited money from utility companies through their attorneys, their wives, the executives, their spouses, their kids, and every other area. We are literally sitting in a position where we have to make sure that transparency matters. And I think there are a few things that we can do, especially by first firing the 5 members that are at the commissions through elections. Number 2, taking the meetings out of 244 Washington Street. I shouldn't even have given you the address. How many of you all, by a show of hands, know where their offices are? Save your time, because most people don't know, right? So we need to start having regional meetings. The same way how this church should be packed, we need to make sure that there are town hall style meetings where the regulatory process is happening in real time, so that when an individual tells a senior citizen on a fixed income that their rate goes up, they can explain it to them in real time, in person, and get comments and remarks to determine if it's fair, equitable, and just for the state and the interest of profitability for the utility industry.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, this question is for you. Should cost be the mitigating factor in determining what energy sources the utilities use, or should goals like cleaner air and reduced carbon emissions be used?
It ultimately all comes down to cost, okay? So in terms of emissions and cleaner air, I mean, I've used this a lot. If you look at Tesla's last quarterly earnings, they made their profit by selling their carbon offsets to other companies. So we can put a monetary value on carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, and move those into cost, okay? The question for all of us is, we don't like price increases, okay? Would we be willing to take higher prices for cleaner air, for a cleaner environment? If you think about people who aren't eligible to vote right now and what they're gonna have in terms of life coming from them, we need to factor in these social costs really from a strategic standpoint of society and not just the financial aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Waits. The Georgia Public Service Commission is scheduled to begin hearing testimony later this month from the Georgia Power officials about how they plan to spend billions of dollars to meet the skyrocketing energy demand, primarily due to projected growth of data centers supporting artificial intelligence. how Georgia Power's long-term 2025 integrated resource plan, what do you think about that plan, and how would you change that plan as a commissioner?
Thank you. I'd love to also go back to the other question regarding how do we educate the public.
Okay, you have
Oh, sure.
30 seconds as
So,
a rebuttal.
very quickly, I spent 15 years working for the federal government, traveling the country, working for FEMA, hurricanes, tornadoes, and things of that nature. So we also have to understand that there is a need to balance the needs. For example, you see what's happening in Puerto Rico. Their grid is constantly out and down because of the fact that they have not made infrastructural investments. So that is necessary. We understand that. But I've also highlighted tonight that even though we need to make those investments, there is a need to balance that with the public. And so for that reason, I support a tiered system for individuals who may not be able to fix income, senior citizens, people of that nature, to help them out when times get hard. Deregulation did not serve the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be
Mr.
appropriate to
Blackman.
make a rebuttal?
Go ahead.
Thank you. It's 30 seconds. The question that you asked specifically on the data centers
Yes.
is specific to understanding that Georgia has become the epicenter for data centers around the United States, and over $500 billion has been committed by companies like Apple, Meta, Microsoft. What we need to do in the IRP and the plan that's been presented by Georgia Power is to ensure that the costs are not overly committed, unburdened on ratepayers. The challenge we have right now, as was mentioned earlier by Mrs. Waits, the governor signed a bill of over $250 million that literally allowed these data centers to be incentivized up front. So when they come into our counties and our cities, when your children are on Snapchat, Instagram, or ChatGPT, there is a fee for that. And these data centers don't pay not 1% of that, because these deals put those burdens on data centers, and we can change that within the integrated resources plan.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, do you have a response or a rebuttal for any of these questions? Okay. All right. No problem.
I'd like to speak to the earlier question. You spoke to earlier how.
Let us know when you're doing a rebuttal, so we know how to do it. Just let us know what you're doing.
Okay. The earlier question that was posed to you had to do with the Georgia Public Service Commission and the hearings that are scheduled. Is that the question you're referring to?
The question that I wanted to speak to is how do we get the word out to the consumer regarding the meetings, given that oftentimes it operates in a clandestine type fashion, in a secretive type fashion? And I had some thoughts about that.
Please.
Yes. So a couple of things came to mind. Social media is very popular right now. Many people get their news from social media. So I support a public awareness campaign. Mr. Blackman has talked about this often, getting out of 244, traveling the state, making some of the meetings accessible to the entire state. And then lastly, I support partnerships with organizations that are already on the ground, feeding information that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, can you talk about, I understand that the emissions from these data centers can be dangerous to the communities in which they're located in. I'm asking Mr. Jones, but anyone at the table can answer the question. Can you talk a little bit and inform us or educate us about those emissions and how they impact our communities?
So at a local level, at a data center right now, what you're seeing is basically mini distribution stations being put into those data centers, and most of those are natural gas charged, and those have emissions emanating from them. So therefore, the local communities there have to be monitoring, and we don't do a good job in Georgia monitoring emissions to really take action against those data centers. Now, I can tell you, full disclosure, I've spent a lot of time at Microsoft and partial Microsoft data centers, so I could be compromised there. However, Microsoft does not want emissions. They want clean free. They're compensated on that. Oracle, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they all want the same thing. The question for all of us here, we won't get to answer until the next round.
You have a rebuttal for that, Ms. Waits?
I also want to highlight the fact that these centers often don't bring jobs to the community. There's a very, very low benefit in terms of jobs. And then they drive up the cost of energy as well as water to keep these particular facilities cool. So again, that's being passed on to the everyday consumer. And then lastly, because of the low cost of the land, they are often located in marginalized and low-income communities.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman.
Yes, ma'am. So I want to paint a picture really quickly. When I served as the director of the Environmental Protection Agency in the Southeast, we were responsible to do this in Kentucky. Many of you all may have heard of cryptocurrency, data mining. These overwhelmingly destroyed many communities in Kentucky because of a lack of water infrastructure. These data centers also draw out exorbitant amounts of water. And so if you think of certain communities, if you just Google Fayette County, Georgia, right here in Georgia, you will see how families that live in rural Georgia with wells on their properties are having overly high amounts of contamination.
Thank you. So we have a question from the floor, but I want to give one more round to this group, and it has to do, I'm going to start with Keisha Waits. You've been a former legislator, and Georgia's legislation intended to protect residential consumers from rising utility costs associated with data centers failed to advance this year. Senate Bill 94 amendment would prevent utility companies from passing data center costs along to residential and small business customers. House Bill 446 would have granted discovery rights to all parties at PSC hearings. As you all mentioned, they need to be more public, and giving stakeholders, customers like ourselves, new authority to request information during electric rate cases and other utility proceedings. Why do you think Georgia Power and the Data Center Coalition oppose both these bills? And would you be in support of one or both of the bills? And after you respond, I'm going to ask Mr. Blackman and Mr. Jones to respond.
Thank you for the question. So I think it's important to highlight that this was, in fact, a legislative process. However, our governor made the decision to do something different. I believe that the PSC is to be a watchdog for the everyday average consumer. However, it appears to me to operate as an advocate for utility companies and energy companies. I would certainly support anything that provides any type of clarity and transparency to the everyday average consumer. So again, that's a legislative process which we can look to the General Assembly. But as a member of the PSC, we also have the opportunity to use our voices by traveling the state to inform individuals, as Mr. Blackman indicated, to change the makeup of the 5 individuals who are a part of the Public Service Commission. And then lastly, what we can do is, through the power of pen, is to propose and go to the General Assembly to write legislation to address some of the issues that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's really not enough time to answer these questions.
We have other rounds. Hold on.
Can you just repeat the last portion of the question?
Why do you think Georgia Power and the Data Center Coalition oppose both the bills? That's Senate Bill 94 that prevented utility companies from passing data center costs along to residential and small businesses.
That's what yeah.
And House Bill 446.
That's what I thought you said. The answer is very simple, because it would cut into their shareholder profits. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at Georgia Power, the example I gave you all earlier about nuclear plant Vogtle, each and every dime of the cost overrun, with the exception of the initial $2 million Georgia Power was on the hook for, went to ratepayers, right? So when you start talking about why a data center or a utility company like Georgia Power reject that, because it will cut into their profit margin. Now, I think what's really important to understand is, from a legislative perspective, I would support any bill that would allow us to not only enhance transparency, but up until 2008, I want you all to hear this, when Governor Perdue entered into office, he cut what was called the Consumer Utility Commission. That commission was in place as a watchdog to protect the rights and the interests of consumers. The Public Service Commission currently has a staff, but they no longer have the scrutiny of the public to be educated, to make an informed decision, but also to hold them accountable.
So you would support one or both of the bills?
I would support the bill on transparency. I heard you say that. And the other bill was on data centers. Mm-hmm. And yeah, yes. I think the data centers need to have more skin in the game. So I would actually support any legislation, and those 2 bills, to my knowledge, are consumer friendly, because they focus specifically on protecting consumers and being transparent on profits.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
It's the same old tired playbook of monopoly, basically trying to control the situation there. This has been going on for 40 years. I'm surprised it's still occurring here in Georgia. That's why I got in the race. If you take this bottle of water here, I don't have a separate bottle for residential customers, a separate bottle for business customers, a separate bottle for data center customers. I got one bottle, one generation station. If I can basically massage the cost however I want to different parties, then I can basically change the prices. So the last thing I want to do is basically now start basically isolating the residential costs and saying that, in fact, it's all in the data centers. So therefore, It all goes back to cost allocation, cost accounting to then set pricing, and you are a captive set of customers. As long as I can keep you there, I can still slosh some cost onto you, keep it lower on the data centers, and be competitive. It's tired, old monopoly behavior. I've seen it. We need to stop it. That's why I'm in the race, to change the laws to make it more equitable.
Thank you all very much. And now we are going to switch and take on questions from our audience and from the YouTube. Do you all have any questions that you want to pose to one another as candidates for this race? They're all trying to keep this very friendly. So with that, we're going to go. Did you have a question, Mr. Jones, for either of the other two candidates?
I saw the invitation. I know you're looking for some sparks.
Not at all.
Okay. I don't want to do anything that would give a Republican to say basically a comment or criticism they can use in their campaign. So we are going to be very collegial on the Democratic side. Okay.
We know that all three of you want what's best for our communities and for Georgia. Okay, Ruth from Rockdale has a question. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Jones. Please explain why this election is important to those who get power from cheaper providers than Georgia Power.
Yeah, so many of the electric generating facilities in Georgia are jointly owned by Oglethorpe and by Georgia Power. Generally, it's about a 70-30 relationship. When you look at the pricing on the EMCs, it's about 12 to 13% less than what you're paying in Georgia Power territory. So as Georgia Power prices goes up, those EMCs are going to go up as well. So there are complaints going on in the EMC community around these price increases as well. What they don't have is the same profit margin that's burdened on all of us there. So it's important for them to vote, even though there's a lot of comments out there around why should we vote? Isn't this really just a Georgia Power issue? It's much broader than that. This is about energy strategy for the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman, do you have a response for that question?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been very fortunate in Georgia to have lived in Atlanta and around Atlanta. So I've had an EMC, which is an electric membership corporation, and I've also had Georgia Power. And so for me, I clearly understand the question, especially when you come from Rockdale, you look at areas and you really want to understand how that works, because no one wants to waste their vote. I mean, every vote matters, but people want to be educated about why these areas are important. So for those of you that may have an EMC, some of the interesting things about it is the Public Service Commission doesn't regulate the same way it does with Georgia Power. However, it operates on the financing part of infrastructure-related projects around energy and generation. So we need to understand how these areas work, but then you also need to understand how, if you have a local utility company, if you're a member, there are returns. If you're a member, you have a vote. There are things that go into these conversations, and I think being able to be aware and educated is very important. So to the people in Rockdale and around the state, it's very, very important for you to understand the difference, but every decision that the Public Service Commission impacts.
Thank you. Ms. Waits.
How many people in the room observed the fire that took place at BioLab in the Rockdale community? How many? My mother lives in Conyers, Georgia, and so that was something that not only impacted me, but it impacted my family and those individuals that I love. So one of the reasons that I believe this race is important is because representation matters. It is a fact that low-income families, African-American families, pay the highest rates as it relates to utility costs. So that's one. Georgia ranks 17th in the nation as it relates to energy cost. As our colleagues have already shared multiple times, that's because they are passing the buck on to you, although they're reaping these unusual and catastrophic profits. I do not believe that utility rates should be a blank check for companies and individuals who profit, although I believe they should get a profit. I think it's important that we make sure that the grid is stable and that we're making the proper investments for our children and for those down the road, but I think we need to balance that through a tiered system for individuals who are on low income as well as fixed incomes so that we don't burden working families. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, I can't say it's from Rockdale, but I can ask the question. This one is not, I don't think this is from you two. But here's the question, and Mr. Jones, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to go right down the line again. Will you promise not to take money from special interest groups that conflict with your duty as a public service commissioner?
Softball question. Of course I promise. Okay?
Okay.
In fact, you can go to my website right now, and I've already disclosed my campaign expenditures and campaign contributions that have occurred, even though that's not required till June 2nd. Again, it's legal, okay? Can you believe that? It's legal for you to take those contributions. We need to change that. So thank you for the easy question.
Okay. All right, same thing, Mr. Blackman.
I hope we would all agree that there should never be a time where an individual elected should ever take contributions from individuals they regulate. When I served under the Biden-Harris administration, I had to sign 3 ethics pledges, so this current administration in Washington is very foreign to me. And not only is it very unethical to take money, but I've actually already been offered checks by various utility companies directly, and I have already made a determination in this election and my past election to not take one dime, dollar, nickel, penny, or resource, including things that do not have to be disclosed as a candidate or in an elected position.
Ms. Waits.
Yes, ethics matters. My colleague on the end can tell you that when you're in the General Assembly as a member, you are not allowed to take any money during the session for the 90-day period of time. That is some legislation that I would wholeheartedly support if I were elected. So yes, I will make that commitment that I will not do that. I also think it's important to note that these forums matter. Our colleagues have already stated that Georgia Power does not intend to raise our rates anytime soon. I believe that that's because of these robust conversations. And then lastly, BioLab has agreed to not reopen. And so understand the power of your voice, the power of your vote, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on these important issues.
Would anybody like to rebut the question?
Let me just correct that. Get in the mic. Okay. Let me correct that. BioLab has not decided not to reopen. BioLab has 2 distribution centers sitting right next door to each other, where next to the building that exploded. They're not going to rebuild that building. And I think it's important that we understand that, because if you are distributing the same chemicals that you were manufacturing, are we not yet still at risk? So it's a difference. So they're not going to rebuild the manufacturing plant, but they still have those 2 distribution plants. So I just wanted to be clear on that, Ms. Waits.
Representative, thank you for the point of order.
Thank you. Now, this is a 1-second lightning question, because this is part 2 from the first question. Will you refuse, it's almost like an oath, will you refuse to take Georgia Power money, either directly or indirectly through attorneys? We're going to start with you, Mr. Jones. You're close to me.
Does it come with a $400 million jet? We all have a price, okay?
Okay, that's your answer.
That's right.
Mr. Blackman.
No.
Ms. Waits.
No, I will not accept donations, but I do think it's important to look at our track record in terms of our careers as to whether or not we have accepted any funding, and I can tell you that that will be important as it relates to this race. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waits. So, Mr. Jones, you can pick them up in the jet once you get it, okay? So, okay. That's it. All right, here's a question. I'm going to ask each of you to take that. I'm going to start with Mr. Blackman first. The average Georgia Power household is paying about $43 more per month on utility bills, with 6 rate increases since the beginning of 2022, with another rate increase to come this summer, which we heard has been paused for now. How can you prevent passing along Georgia Power's 2.7 million customers new electricity-based rates, overrun costs associated with building 2 new Vogtle nuclear plants, and with the cost of coal ash cleanup and other expenses?
So I want people to understand that this race is critical for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a marathon and not a sprint. Okay, you electing one of us today doesn't lower your bills tomorrow. I just want to be very transparent with you, because people will campaign, but governing and campaigning are two separate conversations. What can be done is to have an individual that prepares and educates and mobilizes the community around these areas. So when you think of the cost overruns, the only thing that we can do for the long term is get myself elected in the primary, and then we get elected in November along with Dr. Alicia Johnson. Once you have two commissioners, next year we can pick up a third. And once you have a third, we can begin to level set. What we need to do right now is to make sure that as a commissioner, we focus on being publicly and on record to push back, make recommendations, and stand up to the bully. And these utility companies have done far too much that's behind the veil for us to not bring those to the public. So I'll make sure I'm a public advocate, and I'll make sure every vote you all have well in advance.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, you're next.
Thank you so much. I support an audit of how we're spending dollars. And so, for example, we talked a lot about the fact that Georgia Power has brought in dividends and profits over what they have spent out. So there's an opportunity there to put those dollars back into the pockets of consumers. We've talked a lot about the $296 million in incentives that have been given out globally for our data centers to come to the state of Georgia. We've talked about the fact that they pay 40% less than what you and I pay, meaning a data center, when you look at the rate, pays a less rate than you. So my thought is we have to pass those dollars on back to those individuals who are coming to the state of Georgia. Although there were incentives to attract them and to build business, we've already talked about the fact that data centers bring very, very low jobs. They drive up the cost of energy and water throughout the state. And in addition to that, they utilize low-income land in low-income and marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, thank you.
So this is the abuse and injustice that's been perpetrated upon you. When they built Plant Vogtle, they could not have built it without your financing. So they took $4 billion from all of us to basically fund part of the construction for Vogtle. Georgia Power could not have done it on its own. It would have had to take out vast amounts of debt, which would have lowered its credit rating, and it would have met the financial standards to operate there. So what they did is, basically, we'll take it from the captive audience, or the ratepayers. This rule should have been off the books 30 years ago. And so the fact that it's there now makes it susceptible to be there again. So while all this was going on, though, Southern Company was paying out record dividends to its shareholders. And dividends are supposed to be basically, I have nothing else to do with my cash, I'm going to give it away. They should have been taking their dividends and investing it in Vogtle, but you saw commissioners going to New York to say, in fact, go ahead, float the debt to them, we'll support it with the ratepayers. You have been abused, it's an injustice, that's why I'm in this race. We need to change these rules or they'll do it again.
Thank you. Now another question from our audience. Ms. Waits, what are the ways can energy costs be funded instead of passing costs to the consumers?
Well, when a utility company or any entity comes to the community, they often sign what's called a community benefit agreement. I can give you countless examples of individuals who've come to Atlanta and other areas that I've had the pleasure of representing where there was no benefit to the community whatsoever. So, for example, we've talked a lot about the incentives that have been given out. I'd like to see a tiered system where individuals who pay for their services that is based upon their income. The second thing is this. If the utility companies are making a profit, I would like to see some of that go back into the community in terms of coal ash pond cleanup, in terms of making sure that communities that have been the most vulnerable, exposed and to toxins and so forth from those coal ash ponds, that we put those funds back into those communities that have been greatest impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What other ways can energy costs be funded instead of passing costs to consumers?
So we need more public and private partnerships. I think that's one area that Democrats have actually done a really good job in across the country when you look at how investments are made. So when the Biden administration was in place, they passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. This law, in turn, incentivized the private sector to accelerate projects. So you saw, for example, Q cells in Dalton, battery storage facilities around the state of Georgia. We need to find ways at the state level to be able to do that, especially since we're not seeing it at the federal level. So there are two things that I think we can do as a public service commissioner even without a 3-member voting majority. The first thing we can do is make sure that we're educated and knowledgeable about what products actually exist and how to find state funds to accelerate those programs. And secondly, I'm an alum of an HBCU. I went to Clark Atlanta University. My wife went to Spelman College. We need to mobilize our HBCUs and our minority-serving institutions to build out infrastructure so that we can have the research and the workforce needed to accelerate these programs, especially around clean energy generation.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
If I understand the question, how can you finance or fund energy without coming back to consumers and putting the cost on them? So essentially,
Yeah, what other ways could energy costs be funded instead of passing it to the consumers?
Yeah, I mean, from a utility company, you've got two choices. You can float more stock, not going to do that. You can take on the debt. The debt's going to hit your credit rating, therefore your costs are going to go up. The commission needs to safeguard against that. So therefore, from a financial standpoint, they go back to the consumers. This is the law I want to get off the book, is stop using consumers. Get construction work in progress off the books. It's overdue. Okay? Otherwise, once you do that, utilities now have to go back to the capital markets.
Thank you. There are 2 questions here that are very similar. So I'm with these 2 folks, okay? I won't name their names, but I could. Heather, wherever you are, I agree with this question. And the other question, so let me just ask it. How high does the water and sewer rate plan to get in the near future is already high enough, and many folks are having a hard time paying their bills as it is? If you guys are elected, come on now, what are you going to do once elected to make a difference? Now, we know it won't happen overnight, but it can happen. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Jones, and work my way down the table, and if we don't get answers that'll change those rates, we're going to ask that question again.
Do you throw with your left hand or your right hand? Just let me know. You're a little close here. First of all, the Public Service Commission does not regulate water today, okay? However, there was a request from the state legislature that the Public Service Commission look at regulating water, okay? Now, from my perspective, they don't have the competency or capability to be regulating water. It's kind of questionable if how deep they are as far as understanding electricity generation, electricity management, okay? So from that standpoint, if the commission takes on water regulation, we would certainly be looking at that, but this is, from my perspective, really a county issue in terms of the county water systems. As a resident of DeKalb, I'm quite familiar with what's happening here. We need to get it fixed. I've had too many things going on in my area, but it's really beyond the commission. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I actually agree with the comment made earlier by Mrs. Waits. I mean, we need an audit. If we don't know where the money is, we can't determine how we can save or what we can cut. And while that's not a designation of the Public Service Commission, we can work with the legislative body to encourage that. My father was a United States Army Ranger, and one thing that my dad always talked about was going above and beyond the call of service, right? So we can't just do our jobs as public service commissioners. We got to get up out those seats, walk across the street during the session, and we need to be lobbyists in a sense to be able to advocate on behalf of the consumers and the ratepayers, because that's what it's going to take. And if you really want to understand what can be done over time, the problem with our high bills as it relates to water, which, as Mr. Jones said, is not under the purview of the Public Service Commission, is our outdated water systems. I mean, that's the challenge. Our populations are growing. When I worked as the regional administrator, we bought $385 million to DeKalb County under Michael Thurman's leadership to make sure that we modernize the water infrastructure system. That's not enough money. That's why Jackson, Mississippi is failing. It's why our counties and our cities are failing, and it's why our bills continuously are skyrocketing, but we can work with the legislative body to craft legislation to fix that long term.
Thank you. So I certainly support the thoughts of my colleagues tonight. But I also want to highlight the fact that the needs of Atlanta, DeKalb, we were under a federal consent decree, oftentimes as it related to upgrading our infrastructure. So I think that's important to highlight. So the needs in Sparta and Brunswick and all over the state are going to be very, very, very different. So the infrastructure and the money and the investment that we're going to need to make in those areas are going to be different. So for that reason, again, I support a tiered system to ensure that we're able to meet all the needs of the state throughout the state of Georgia. Thank you.
You have a rebuttal, go ahead. You have 30 seconds.
I do, and it's not necessarily a rebuttal, but something that was mentioned specific. Today, it was reported in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the Trump administration is rolling back PFAS, which are the dangerous chemicals considered forever chemicals in our water. So the question about the water systems is even bigger, because not only do we need better water infrastructure, we need cleaner water. The water is a tremendous impact, and that's something we have to pay attention to.
So as we move into closing statements, I want you to think about legislation that you would support, and this is based upon some of the questions that you guys have asked. Legislation you would support. Is there any thought about capping current rates or future rates to consumers? Any thought, and Ms. Waite spoke to this somewhat, in terms of an income-based rate structure? And then lastly, if you're elected, what do you intend to do? Who would like to start? Okay, Ms. Waits, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the question. I've already talked a lot about a tiered system, but I want to go back to ethics. And we talked about a lot tonight about the fact that we should be taking funding or monies from individuals that we're going to be regulating, specifically Georgia Power. That's the elephant in the room. So I'd like to see some legislation, and I would be fully supportive of legislation that will hold the PSC to the same regulations and rules that the General Assembly members have, and that is that we do not take any funding from individuals that we are to regulate. That would, I think, do a lot of work in terms of goodwill for the public. And then lastly, capping rates. One of the reasons that I think that's dangerous is that we tried to do that before as it related to taxes in terms of rolling the mill back. We don't know what the infrastructural needs will be 30 years from now. So again, I support a tiered system that is based upon the needs of those specific communities. Thank you so much.
Okay, let me just ask one question. Tommy, was that a minute or a minute and a half?
That was a minute. You asked the question, so that it came down to it have to be a minute.
Okay, so we're gonna give Ms. Waits 30 more seconds. So each of you will have a minute and a half to respond to the final closing
Are we
question.
on the rebuttal part? I mean,
No, this is the final
oh, so it's closing,
closing remarks.
just like.
Yeah, so you go ahead with your thought.
This is my closing statement? Okay.
No, and remember when I asked the question, I said incorporate this into your closing statement.
You did. Please forgive me. So I will close with this. I've spent 3 terms in the Georgia House of Representatives. I had the privilege of serving on the Atlanta City Council, where we took on some pretty difficult issues. I have a history of standing up when it comes to taking on tough issues, public safety training facility, ensuring that we had a curfew when necessary, making sure that we're not putting people in jail and they're losing their lives. Those are things that I've already done. So judge me based upon my track record, the work that I've already done. I have a lot of pride in the fact that I am accessible, the fact that I have been around. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. But again, this is a very, very important election. And I think with all of the interest from Republicans, I think that speaks to that fact. So I look forward to speaking with each and every one of you, traveling throughout the state to learn more about the issues that are important to you, and certainly learning more about how we can improve the lives of everyday Georgians. And thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman.
So policies that I would support include, well, let me start with the capping portion. I think the only group that is most feasible to be able to cap would be our senior citizens. When you're a senior citizen on a fixed income and your utility rate goes up, your income doesn't go up. And I think we need to protect our seniors. Our most vulnerable populations have been compromised well too much in our nation. And we also need to understand that as of February of this year, the President of the United States has essentially frozen the low-income heat and energy assistance program. I support federal legislation that not only allows federal money to come in for energy assistance, especially for single and working moms in the state of Georgia. We have seen far too often rural communities suffer at the hands of this while not even having access to broadband. So I think broadband expansion, making sure energy assistance program are readily available, and then lastly, committing ourselves to addressing energy burden by aggressively pursuing renewable energy options. My closing statement, my name is Daniel Blackman. Prior to doing this, I was a Democratic nominee for the Public Service Commission in 2020. 2021, I made it to a runoff. We were able to accumulate over 2.3 million votes. And
Finish your statement.
And what's most important is that when I did not make the election, I was elected, I was appointed to serve to serve this region. I haven't left. My family, and to my wife, if she's watching, has given up the entirety of their lives for me to serve. If I weren't running today, I'd be supporting a candidate to make sure that they were in this race, and I hope to earn your vote on June the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Blackman. Mr.
Thank you.
Jones.
I need to go back to what I mentioned earlier, that 5 hours ago, Georgia Power issued an announcement. They're going to hold residential rates flat for 3 years, okay? Why would they do that just now in the middle of an IRP, 7 days before we have a primary election? Why? Because they know price is the number one issue that's on people's mind right now, and they're basically trying to keep you away from the polls. We've already solved the issue. Just go about your business. Nothing to see over here, okay? This is classic monopoly behavior, okay? So here are the 4 things you need to know about monopolies when they're abusing you, okay? First of all, they raise prices. Have your prices gone up? They harm competition. You asked earlier about competition. Don't see much of it around here. They stifle innovation. We don't want rooftop solar energy. We don't want and they compromise regulators, and our regulators are compromised. We have an abusive monopoly now whose influence is undue on this state. This election is so critical. I'm asking for your vote. I'm in this race because my wife basically said, honey, you either get in the race or you get over it because you're driving me crazy, all right? So I'm in this race to make a difference here for all of you. Thank you.
Well, listen, thank you, and please join me in thanking these candidates for coming out tonight. Thank you very much. Tim?
All questions have to be on the card, or can I just?
You are the timer. You have a question.
You want to do it? The mic? I mean, to the panel. My question for as our nuclear power plants in Georgia, I understand, I know during the Obama administration that he did give the licensing. Those licenses was froze for about 30 years. He did give the license. So I guess my question would be, are they going to build more nuclear power plants in Georgia?
I believe the answer is yes, but it won't be in the near term, and it won't be the same type of nuclear power plant that we just built. There's a lot of really small nuclear reactors that are really in the incubation development stage. I think in 5 years, a lot of those are going to break through, that you're going to have much more affordable, much more replicable nuclear power that'll help us get away from coal, get away from natural gas. So yes, I'm hoping we see more nuclear plants, but not at the size and funding they did with Vogtle.
If you paid any attention over the last 48 hours of the president's trip to the Middle East, that's your answer. Absolutely, there's going to be more nuclear in Georgia. They went over to Qatar and to the Middle East to increase the investment around artificial intelligence and also fossil fuel energy, including the next generation of nuclear. We will see it. I agree. I don't know if we'll see it in 3 years or in 7 years, but we will see it. It will be coming because the amount of people moving into the state and the data centers are going to push a further demand on our grid. So that's the answer.
I think the answer has been made, and the answer is yes. However, I do believe that we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity, to push for solar. We can do that through incentives. Currently, Georgia Power has a buyback program that many people are not aware of. And should we increase those incentives to make it more affordable for everyday average families, I think you'll start to see more families explore those opportunities. Thank you.
How you doing? Did you know that the two big railroads in the state of Georgia, CSX and Norfolk Southern, are contracted more to bring more coal in. So those plants, if nobody's watching, and we're supposed to be going green, and we're supposed to be watching all these things and getting away from coal, but I understand that Burlington Northern is bringing in more coal into Georgia. Is there anybody watching that? See what's going on with that?
So, look, anybody can answer, and I'll make this really quickly. I oversaw the EPA during this time with all the trail derailments and all the increase in fossil fuel, the pursuit of more fossil fuel. The problem is there's two sides of the coin. One side has wanted to accelerate the advancement of renewable energy by 2040. The other side wants to use as much fossil fuel energy in other forms to line the pockets of very wealthy utility owners that they have used for a long time. I think it's unfortunate because the #1 population in the United States that suffers from pre-existing respiratory illnesses due to fossil fuel industries are black and brown communities. Biolab is just something that happened that we see far too often because of its proximity to our communities, but these fossil fuel facilities have taken the life expectancy of black and brown people 2.7 years lower for black women and 2.1 years by black men because of our proximity to fossil fuel communities and the compromise on our health.
And we're gonna invite you all to please give us at least 15, 20 minutes in the multipurpose hall. We've got some food. We need everybody to come to the multipurpose hall because we don't like to take food home. And you can continue your private conversation. We're turning it into a meet and greet. But before we do that, let's give the candidates one more round. And Mr. Blackman, I gotta recognize our elder, which is Elder David Rome. Come on up, Elder. As I said, now the A.M.E. Church is like 500 churches strong across the state, and we're just the Atlanta East District, which has 24 churches. So this is our direct supervisor for the Atlanta East District, and then of course we have Bishop, which is Bishop Mitchell, who is not here, and then we have the connectional, which again I introduced earlier, which is Dr. Dozier. But we want to give Elder Rome a few seconds to come up and greet us.
Again, to our moderator, and we're just honored to have our labor leader come and share to Sister Dozier, who's educator of the educator, and to Sister Taylor, who's a representative of the representatives. Let's thank them for convening tonight. But I was moved by being here tonight. And I wasn't sure, we've been in an annual conference, and I wasn't sure we were meeting in person. And I was at the house waiting, and when I realized we was in person, I realized I need to be here to hear. And there's three things that I heard from these candidates. And let's just give all of them some love because all of them are awesome leaders. But what I appreciated was the education. Many times we don't know how to vote because we have not been educated. And for you to come and educate us tonight have been awesome. And part of the church role is to help carry the message out from here. So I appreciate the education. I heard the lines of the haves and the have-nots. And I didn't realize how important it is to be on the right side, because there are two sides, and many times we don't get the share that the others are getting. And I heard you all clearly tonight saying that we need representation and we need to know what's going on. We need audits. I heard the church being reminded we need to be a part of that, creating more equity. And then I heard clearly tonight that we've got to be a part of the process of putting the right people in the right place to represent us. And your coming out tonight plays a part of the church being able to say, okay, it's important to get out and vote. It's part of our life. And it's more than just Sunday morning, because if we shouting on Sunday morning and can't pay the bills on Monday, we're in trouble. So again, the encouragement to our churches, and not only our churches, I represent Bishop Michael Leon Mitchell, who he's very much a part of this new movement. As a matter of fact, in our meeting this week, he's going to have social action being a part of it, this piece on. So we hear you tonight saying that voting is important, and not only voting the right people in place. And we thank you for coming to share in this place tonight. Again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for being a part. Thank this team for pulling it together, because education is everything, and that's a major part of where we've got to be as a black church and as a black community and as a community as a whole. Again, thank you so very much for this opportunity for us to hear and share.
And we want to, on behalf of the Atlanta East District, we want to invite each of you to visit our churches, all 24 of our churches, and Elder, you'll let the pastors know that they need to give them a word from the pulpit. So.
Well, and I will, and that's part of why I wanted to come to make sure that I was here tonight, so that A.M.E. pastors, and let's be clear, the A.M.E. churches, we are, in my opinion, the strongest political group in the state of Georgia. We are. But I wanted to make sure that I was saying to us real clearly that it's important to me, it's important to us, and believe you me, on our district, we take it very seriously. Our people need to hear you. Our people need to see you. They need to know these are the people who will help make a difference, and that the church and politics, we're on the same coin. We are in the same family. We're in the same community. So I will give the word, and it's the word of my bishop. Yes, I want you to come. I want you to show up. I want them to see, because they won't know who you are until they come and see you. And tonight, just seeing you and hearing you made the difference. I couldn't have got that sitting on the couch. But to come and see you, and for you to go and see the people, for you to be out there, then that will make a world of a difference in hearing your stories. And you all have great stories and great benefits for the community. So I endorse, I strongly believe that we ought to be together. And this particular election is so important because it's going to determine if we can stay in these big old houses and then we can pay for this water that all of us who live in DeKalb County know that's a challenge. Yeah. All right then.
Is that yours? Okay. All right. Reverend Higgins, well, I guess the elder could have, but we won't. We'll switch it up. Come in. Close Reverend Dr. Higgins to close us out. Like she said, she's on our ministerial staff here. Close us out in the word of prayer. And please, just how y'all want them to come? Which door you want them to go through for the multipurpose hall? Okay, just we need to move this out the way because we're not letting nobody out that door. We're making you come all the way this way to go to that multipurpose hall. And you guys, please come for just a little while with us to speak to the voters.
Representative, before we end tonight, and I'm eager and hungry to eat, is it possible, there are a number of people that I've encountered throughout the state of Georgia that does not believe that this race is in play for Democrats at all. Can you speak to the fact that this is a Super Bowl anomaly in an off year in 2025, that these races are in fact in play, and why there was the political gerrymandering of some sort to put them on the ballot in the way that this be placed on the ballot? Can you speak to that briefly so that individuals will understand that these are winnable races?
Oh yeah, they're definitely winnable races. I shared in the beginning that there was a lawsuit that was filed saying that it was unconstitutional to make us vote by districts because it prohibited the minority from being able to elect someone to represent us. I almost said them, which is true. I mean, we've never had a minority on that board for any period of time, and the one that's on there now was appointed by the governor to fill someone who retired, and he looked like us, but he ain't with us, if you know what I mean. Okay, and so that's why I have been pushing this, because we have an opportunity a real chance, which has been a long time since Daniel, when you ran before, that people didn't, this is the most overlooked item on the ballot. People skip over it because of the title, Public Service Commissioner. And like Mr. Blackman was saying, we tried to get it changed to public utilities because the utilities click, right? It was a bipartisan bill. Both the Republicans and the Democrats wanted to change the name of it. But guess what? They figured that would make you too smart. So it didn't go anywhere. That's deliberate. So what Ms. Waits is saying is that, and we're in the church, so we're nonpartisan, so we have to be, very careful in how we say that, but we believe in policy, and we will fight for policy. And from a policy standpoint, we need someone who can relate to how our lives are. You know what I mean? Most of the people that are on the PSC, as you've heard from our panelists, that they are getting unlimited. I was just reading something today, and I was sharing it, that the current chairman who represents District 2, has already collected over $409,000 in contributions from Georgia Power's attorneys this quarter. And this is quarter one of the year. And the incumbent for District 3 was at $198,000. So, that's just fact. I'm not, I don't care what party you are. That lets you know that they are peddling. You say, you rub my thumb, I rub your fist. And so it's important that we take advantage of this opportunity, that we talk about this race, that we explain to people how it impacts them. And you were saying to tell how to get people to go to the polls. You have to meet people where they are, number one. Number two, you have to attach it or connect it to how it impacts their household directly. That's how you get their attention. And once they understand, oh, that's me. I'm listening now, what do I need to do? And that is how you get them involved. And 9 times out of 10, when you take the issues, and I'm one of those, I preach it all the time to our Social Action Commission, we don't go asking for anything, we go taking something. We have information and resources that we give wherever we go. We give out merchandise, all kind of merchandise, and say, how can we help you? Because what we know is that once you inform and educate a voter or a constituent or a citizen, you don't have to ask them to go vote. They've connected the dots, and they join the team, and they go vote and get you some more people to vote in those little areas where you don't see votes coming from. But we have got to put on our boots and put them on the ground and go into those areas where we don't like to go and say, look, you need help with your utilities. We have resources for you. You need medical resources. We have those connections for you. And so we don't go asking for something. We go asking, how can we help you? But we take them the resources. So, Ms. Waits, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, because I definitely want you guys to please talk about this. Oh, we canvass. Matter of fact, we're canvassing tomorrow night. We canvass. We do caravans. We're phone banking. We're doing all of that right now as you speak, because we know that when we touch each other, and we are each other's keeper, bottom line. And from what's going on now in this climate, we're going to have to bar together, because you know what the old people used to say. Our old folks say, we're going to survive these 4 years just like we survived these 400 years, the last 400 years. They're going to pop the step in the head, but we know how to survive. And so with that in mind, the only way we survive is that we unite. Go back to the days where it's to go down to the street and ask Miss Susie for a cup of sugar. We got to work in this together. So our social action ministries will be going to the churches that are in our district, making sure that they have the information, answering their questions, but we need you to talk. There's plenty of information out there on the tables from the candidates, as well as some from the Social Action Commission. You got pictures of the candidates. You got info, and I even took up, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do a little short bio. You have a little bio clip on them, and this you can take into the polls with you in the precincts. If you want to mark it when you leave, you can fold it up and take it into the precinct with you. You also have some information on the PSC. I was just reminded that, and I have to share this, and we're gonna go eat, yeah, I promise. I gotta share this. Because I know, right?
And we were talking about the proceeds that they were making. Mr. Jones was talking about how they benefit from the money. In 2023, and I have been, as a legislator, we have gone to Georgia Power down there on Ralph McGill every year, and we go and listen to them try to sell us on legislation to help them get what they want again. And so I know the chairman and the president and the new CEO who came from the Southern Company. Come on, Mr. Blackman, y'all know. Miss Kimberly Green in 2023. Again, the chairman, the president, and the CEO of Georgia Power. She earned a total compensation of $4,976,813. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, $4,976,813. Okay, this included $890,969 in salary, $1.4 million in bonuses, 0 in stock options, but then she got another $2 million in stock awards, and then $57,000 in other compensation according to the proxy statements filed by the 2023 fiscal year. $4,976,813. Come on, y'all. She can't even spend that in a lifetime. Well, maybe in a lifetime, but that's just how critical this is. You see, we're down here struggling. We're eating beanie weenies and they're eating steak. Okay? So we're going to transition over so that the team can break everything down here, and we're going to let you come out this door right here. Candidates, you want to lead the way? Oh, we're going to do our prayer first.
That's your next governor, Ms. Taylor.
First, I want to thank all of our voters for being here. Thank you to our candidates for agreeing to serve as panelists. This was insightful, it was educational, and it's something that we need to do more of. Because you're right, people do not know who the Public Service Commission, what that position does and what it's for. So let us pray. Oh God, we say thank you tonight. Thank you for this candidate forum and all of those who found it not robbery to be here and to come to learn and be educated on who the Public Service Commission, what their position is, and what they're required to do. God, be with these candidates as they continue to run their campaigns. May they all be successful. God, we know that everybody cannot win, but there's still success even if there is not a win. So God, we just say thank you right now for the presence of your Spirit in this space. And now may you bless the food that has been prepared. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All righty.
Thank you so much. Thursday and Friday, yeah, in the evening.